March 2020, Canada declared a nationwide lockdown. The novel coronavirus was running loose, rapidly spreading all over the world. The message was clear.
Enough is enough. Go home and stay home.
And just like that, getting close enough to someone became synonymous with danger. Almost a year later, we're unfortunately still grappling with this pandemic. But despite all of what's happened in the last year, one thing became abundantly clear to me: our need for social connection. At first, the prospect of limited social interaction wasn't a big deal to me. My wife and I have chronically kept ourselves busy with work, and over the last several years, our social circle has really dwindled down. So I thought, out of all the people I know, I'd be immune from the negative effects of quarantine and social isolation. But it didn't take long until I started to feel anxious about my own social well-being. Now, it's very easy to dismiss social well-being as secondary to physical well-being. And working in healthcare myself, I've been guilty of associating social pain as less consequential than physical. But what does the science say? In 2009, a psychologist by the name of Julian Holt-Lundstad analyzed 148 studies with over 300,000 participants from around the world. Her study indicated that people with strong social relationships are 50% less likely to die prematurely than those with weaker ones. And the impact of social relationships on mortality is comparable with other well-established risk factors. So for example, if you worry about what smoking, overeating, and not exercising do to your health, then perhaps you should really consider what the lack of social interaction is doing to you. Essentially, weak social connections can be a significant danger to our health. So this got me thinking, given the unprecedented times we're living in, it's now more important than ever to take this matter seriously. And what can I do to repair my social relationships while still doing my part in preventing the spread of this virus? I recently read this book, Together, by Dr. Vivek Murthy, who's a former Surgeon General of the United States under Obama. In his time as Surgeon General, he saw what he called a loneliness epidemic, despite being the most connected people in human history. And he's outlined 4 strategies to combat the looming loneliness that this pandemic brings, and how to have a more authentic human connection. Spend time each day with those you love. Now, this much is obvious and a no-brainer, but our society glorifies hustle culture, and cliches like no pain, no gain is often celebrated, usually at the cost of our relationships. So really adding an element of intentionality with whom you spend time with. And this isn't limited to the people in your immediate household. Since it's just me and my wife, I've been visiting my parents more often in the last several months, and really making a concentrated effort to have meaningful conversations. And you can also take advantage of the technology we have. So for example, I've been replacing texts with video calls, even for the most trivial things, just to compensate for the lack of face-to-face interactions. Dr. Murthy believes that it's not necessarily the quantity or frequency, but rather the quality of these connections and how we feel about them. Focus on each other. Really focus on each other. Now try to eliminate distractions when interacting with others, and throw away that pervasive myth of multitasking and fully embrace the presence of the person you're interacting with. My wife and I have devoted the first hours of each morning as sacred, where we really get to have deep and meaningful conversations. And even on times when we're just shooting the breeze, we still try to be as immersed in those conversations as possible. Now, one thing that has helped tremendously in fostering that kind of environment is simply the removal of our cell phones. Our over-reliance on our smart devices can be a detriment to our social connections. And even though we creatively craft rules around what's acceptable phone use, we all know that we're not really fooling anyone. Embrace solitude. Now, this might sound counterproductive because here we are talking about rebuilding connections, yet I'm advocating for solitude. Now, by solitude, I don't mean just being alone, but rather what you do while you're alone. Psychologists and neuroscientists have found that focused solitude correlates with increased intimacy, and activates parts of our brain responsible for incorporating meaning in our lives. The problem is, we live in a world that's perpetually on the go, demanding us to keep up. Being free from these interruptions allows us to access our deeper thoughts and feelings. And this practice of introspection plays a critical role in forming relationships with others, because as we become more attuned to our own feelings, we naturally gain an empathic ability to recognize and relate these feelings in others. This doesn't always come easy, since we've convinced ourselves that to be productive, we need to stay busy. So even for some of us who've been granted the luxury of working from home, we still need to reserve time for solitude on a regular basis. So in my case, I've dedicated specific times in the day and in the evening for some focused solitude. I have my morning meditation as soon as I get up, and I journal right before bed. I found that training my focus in these activities has really helped me be more attentive when engaging with others. Help and be helped. Service is a form of human connection that reminds us of our shared humanity. Dr. Naomi Eisenberger is a social psychologist who's known for her research on the neural basis of social pain and social connection. And in 2016, she reported that the experience of helping others lowers activity in the brain's stress and threat centers, while at the same time increasing activity in the parts of the brain associated with caregiving and rewards. Now, all this means is that helping others not only reduces stress, but it also promotes social bonding and strengthens our sense of well-being. The practice of service doesn't have to be a huge undertaking. What I've been doing is conducting small acts of kindness, where it can be as small as offering words of appreciation to the grocery store clerk or helping a friend score a job interview. These day-to-day exchanges only take seconds, but create a meaningful sense of connection and reminds us of our shared purpose and value for others. Going through this pandemic has really shown me that while it's important to be physically distanced, we don't need to be socially distancing. And we're fortunate today that technology offers us opportunities to strengthen our connections remotely. This really makes me think back of when I used to work bedside and on the patients I cared for on their final moments. The size of their bank accounts and their status were never really the benchmark for a meaningful life. What they always talked to me about was their relationships. At this moment in time, for all of our differences, our shared experience going through this pandemic is itself a bond. It's something we'll have in common for the rest of our lives. And as Dr. Murthy says, while vaccines will help us survive, it's in healthier relationships where we'll thrive. I'm definitely no expert in this subject. Like many of you, I'm still learning as I go. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below if you've had the same struggle as I did, or if you have any tips that you can share in rebuilding connections. Thank you for watching, and stay kind to yourself.